The Mannin Line with Beth Espey.
Well, first, good afternoon. It is Beth in for Andy today. Chris Quirk is on the phones and we would love to hear from you. Whatever is on your mind, get in touch. 66 13 68 is the number to call. You can also text studio@manxradio.com or 166 177 or find us on WhatsApp as well. Lots in the news today. Some good news for cardiology patients. Those who've had their appointments cancelled will be seen before next year. We've also heard on Manx Radio Live today from the new chair of the Housing Board. He says he intends to drive forward the work of the person who held the position previously. What do you make of that? Or perhaps there's something else entirely that you'd like to talk about. Whatever it is, we are here until 1 p.m. Now, speaking of good news from Manx Care, there's some more good news with regards to hip fractures. Nobles Hospital is outperforming all other providers on a key section of the National Hip Fracture Database. Now, this report has been published for 2023. It's based on hip fractures in 2022. And to tell us more about that, we're joined on the line now by the consultant orthopaedic surgeon, Ian Wright. Good afternoon, Mr. Wright. Thank you for joining us. What exactly does this mean for us?
It demonstrates that we're doing pretty well when it comes to looking after patients with hip fractures. These fractures are fragility fractures. You or I wouldn't get one of these fractures if we just fell over. These patients are some of the oldest and frailest in the hospital who get admitted with a broken hip. It's well established with evidence that if you operate on these patients as soon as possible, with the aim of being able to get them up and about as quickly as possible, that you save lives. It's been established over many years on the national database. We've been contributing evidence to the database for many years, and in some areas we perform pretty well. In this particular one, key performance indicator number 2, which is prompt surgery, we came top of the league, and hence the news report.
And you did say there, in some areas we perform pretty well. What about looking at it as an overall picture? What areas do we need to work on, perhaps?
Well, we're already doing that work, and in fact it's already done. So of the 8 key performance indicators, we do well, what I would consider to be, good to excellent in 4 of the 8, and we do pretty poorly in the other 4, but that's on this report. And that was because we didn't have what we call an orthogeriatrician, which is a medical doctor as opposed to a surgeon, that also helps look after these patients. Traditionally speaking, the orthopaedic surgeons are the ones that go in with the hammers and chisels and put the new bits of metal in, and then it's the physicians that will look after these patients on the ward and help them with their general medical care and rehabilitation. Up until very recently, we've not had anyone in place doing that in a dedicated fashion, but we have this year appointed a consultant in that role. And so we expect all the other key performance indicators during 2023 to rise towards the top, such that when the report comes out this time next year for 2023's work, I expect we'll be close to the top in all of them.
And when will that review of your services currently ahead of the next year's report actually be taking place? Who does that?
We do that in-house. We meet every 3 months and discuss all the cases that have come in for the previous 3 months. We're constantly monitoring our own performance, and I've seen from the meetings we've had this year, which we've looked at the first 6 months' work, we are doing far, far better than we were on these other key performance indicators, which look at things like bone protection medication and delirium assessments, and just actual review by an orthogeriatrician, which previously we've not really had.
So what does this mean for your team, Mr. Wright?
It's nice to see a bit of good news. coming out of the hospital for once, because, it's generally bad news that gets reported. It's nice to have a bit of recognition that we're performing pretty well in comparison with most of the hospitals across the UK, better than a number of them. So it's good for morale, certainly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Okay, no problem.
That is Ian Wright, the consultant orthopaedic surgeon, just telling us that Nobles Hospital outperforming all other providers on a key section of that National Hip Fracture Database. There'll be more about that on manxradio.com. You may be able to go and have a look at that review yourself. Back to the lines now, and on line 2 we can join Neil. Good afternoon, Neil.
Good afternoon, Beth. My issue is I'm concerned about the proposed changes to the work permit system. I think it is the very last protection which local Manx people have to get a job on their island. And I underline those last two words, their island, because there seems to be a sort of misnomer that we seem to be becoming an extension, rather County Man, rather than Isle of Man. I look at the benefits which people are given to come into the island. They're given resettlement packages. They're given 3 years national insurance holiday. Those benefits are not apportioned to young Manx people. And I work with a lot of young Manx people who go through apprenticeship schemes, and invariably after 1 or even 2 years, they find they just simply cannot afford the price of housing here. They are not prepared to pay the extortionate price of rental, and we lose them. So I think it was Mrs. Kane that was talking last week, said they had 500 jobs and people waiting to come in to take jobs here. Well, how about reinstating the 423 young Manx people under the age of 30 who are actually in work, who've left the island because they can't afford to live here? It's a total imbalance. We are, in effect, forcing the indigenous population off the Isle of Man and replacing them with people from England, South Africa and various countries. And before anybody comes on with poisonous anonymous texts saying that I'm speaking in a racist tone or bigoted, certainly not. I have a very good working relationship with the Filipino lads that work at our company, and I admire the fact that the majority of them have wives who are working in the care system, which is a very difficult job under difficult circumstances. But I think the whole root cause of many of the problems on this island is the buy-to-let system, whereby wealthy pensioners are moving into the Isle of Man. They're buying up extortionate amounts of local property and renting it out at very high rates of rental.
OK, Neil, you raised a couple of interesting points there. I'm just going to remind you that due to timing issues you've been told over the summer recess and the deadline for uploading to the Register of Business, the Department of Enterprise is going to be bringing work permit reforms before the November sitting of Tynwald. Those proposals, if approved, will be required to be taken across 2 sittings in November and December before they become effective from the 1st of January 2024, if they were approved. Neil, you talked about the benefit system. This is something that we have asked about. I wonder if there's some confusion about the fact that people come over here and automatically may be eligible, it's seen, for certain benefits. We have asked that question. We were told by the Department of Enterprise that an individual's ability to access housing and broader welfare benefits is based on their residency status. It's not affected by their work permit. Once an individual has completed a period of residency, the length of which varies depending on the benefit type, they will be eligible to apply for and receive benefits, and this would normally be a minimum of 5 years continuous residency. So I think that notion, Neil, of people just coming over here and automatically being able to apply for benefits is not the case. And I guess also there are people here, Neil, obviously we love our young people to stay here on the Isle of Man and to work and bring up their families here, but some of them do want to go away and see the bigger world.
I quite agree, but actually I'm not coming from the angle of benefits. I'm coming from the angle of resettlement packages. I know people who have travelled to the island who are getting £12,000, £13,000 or £14,000 as a resettlement package and a job linked in accordance with that. And then as an added extra, they have 3 years where they do not have to pay national insurance contributions. Many of the wealthy pensioners who have moved here have done so because the threshold on inheritance tax in the United Kingdom has been reduced to £325,000. And that includes the price of their home they're living in. It goes to £500,000 if that home is being passed on to a sibling who is actually living with them. So coming to the Isle of Man, where they don't have to pay 40% inheritance tax, where they're only paying half the higher rate of income tax, which is 20% in the Isle of Man as against 40%, where there is no capital transfer tax, where there is no stamp duty, where there is no gains tax. They are coming to El Dorado, and they are investing in property, keeping the price of property artificially high, and this is effectively forcing people off. I know many young people, I've worked with many apprentices through the aerospace sector. They would love to stay here, but they want their independence. They want a home. They want to build a home with their girlfriend or their partner and have a family, and they are simply unable to do so. And when they see other people coming over to effectively take jobs which they would be doing and given all these added extras, I'm afraid they're not very happy. And many of the young people I talk with are horrified. They feel abandoned. They feel the government has just let them down. They seem quite happy to let the local Manx people drift off and then pay people to come in and replace them in their jobs. I just think it's absolutely appalling. We have a government who I'm beginning to wonder whether our government actually represents the views of the Chamber of Trade and Commerce and the development lobby, or whether they're actually investing in the interests of Manx people, because I think it is the former. They are actually becoming like second-rate citizens on their own island, and I think that is absolutely disgraceful and needs addressing.
Neil, have you risen or taken this issue up with your own MHKs?
My MHKs aren't even in government, Beth. They sit on the sidelines and throw incendiaries in. I think you get. I've written to the press. I've also been on this line 2 or 3 times. But the people I work with are really singing from the same tune book, to be honest. They are horrified at what is going on. We're seeing the Isle of Man just completely covered in concrete. We're seeing planning regulations completely overruled. They're cutting down trees, destroying ancient hedgerows and covering the place with concrete, simply to accommodate wealthy investors from the UK to buy buy-to-let properties. And it really needs sorting out.
Neil,
which is the root cause of many of the island's problems, in my view.
Thank you so much for taking the time to phone us this lunchtime.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your help, Beth. Bye-bye.
Take care, Neil. So those were Neil's thoughts. What do you think? Jeff says, I agree with everything Neil said. Keep the work permit simple. Gary says, I think they should keep the work permit. If they want to get rid of it, give the people a referendum on it instead of making a choice that no one supports. So as we know, it's not going to come to the October sitting of Tynwald. That order paper was published this morning. We noticed it wasn't on it. Contacted the Department for Enterprise, and now we know that it's going to be brought forward instead before the November and December sittings of Tynwald. Back to the lines, and we can join Bonzo now. Good afternoon, Bonzo.
Good afternoon. Yes, your previous caller, very interesting and eliciting some of the truths that are never spoken. And if people speak them, tend to be unpersoned quite rapidly within the Manx economy. Yes, talking about the vote on work permits. Oh yes, what a surprise that it's not being put to this month's Tynwald. Mainly because I dare say somebody has had a little check round and found that it probably wouldn't get voted through. So there needs to be some more arm twisting. And the arm twisting will happen before the November sitting.
Well,
so that's politics for you. As for the unequal influence of people like Chamber of Commerce and the structure of the economy and the taxation system, whereby it essentially is the welfare state that I've spoken about on quite a few occasions, where we have the larger portion of the population essentially subsidising the wealth of the minority. And the richer you are, the more subsidy you get. Over the past 30 years, the top quartile of incomes, top 25% of incomes, and certainly the top 5% of incomes, have done extraordinarily well. They have had a very, very easy ride. And we can see that by the diminution of our public services and the black hole that we now have ever increasing in reserves and the structural deficit that we have. And that is just the product of decades not properly organising taxation so that the people with the broadest shoulders actually pay the most. It's not as if we have to tax them until the pips squeak. With a forthcoming Labour government, of course, we can well afford to raise top rates of tax, and it would still be a remarkable difference in favour of quite wealthy people if they came here rather than remained in UK under a Labour regime which would have 50% top rates of tax, probably elements of a wealth tax as well, taxing assets. We provide a very, very comfortable environment for these people.
All right, Bonzo.
Yeah, that's great. But the thing is that they need to start paying for it.
All right, Bonzo, thank you very much as ever. Lovely to hear your thoughts this lunchtime. Quickly now to line 2. We can join Howard. Good afternoon, Howard.
Hi, Beth. I just come in late on the programme, and the last bit I heard of that chap talking there, Neil, he's more or less saying what I've been saying for a long, long time, that a lot of the properties on the island are bought because the interest rates for the last 10, 12 years have dropped here and the UK. So what these people are doing, they've got pension funds and they're reinvesting in property here in the Isle of Man and then renting it out. So not only do they own the property, which is increasing in price, they're also getting paid paid for owning the property. And people here on the island will hear about this as one person or one company. They were formed and they had over 300 properties. Now, if that's not a business, what is? And I'm not saying that these properties were in the first-class condition, because I believe, and I know 2 people that lived in them, they were in serious disarray. They wouldn't get any work done or anything in them. But these people were owning the properties, and that is why, one of the reasons why a lot of the Isle of Man has become, semi-derelict, because the people were buying up these properties cheaply and using it as a means of earning an interest higher than what they would do if their money was in the bank. So it's not a new thing, and that Neil that was on there is very true. It's what he was saying. It's caused in the last 20 years the depletion of property for people to buy. Because I can say this personally, because I tried to get a mortgage many years ago, and the house that I went for, and I had arrangements made with the bank to go for it, the chap that owned it sold it back to himself through another company that he owned, and then he sold it from that company to another company. He owned 3 companies. So needless to say, I never got the house. And that was 40 years ago. So it's not a new thing. This has been going on for many, many years. And our government have actively encouraged it. And they're saying now with the board that, oh Lord, I've forgotten, but the ones that's agreeing with the taking away, the removing of
the Chamber of Commerce.
Permits. Pardon?
The Chamber of Commerce, is that who you're talking about? Yeah.
It's old age is creeping up on me.
It's creeping up on me too, don't worry.
They're naturally going to vote for this because it will give them carte blanche to bring in whoever they want. And we have a very large black economy here on the island, cash in hand. So if they take away the controls and the ability to tax people through working and employment, then it's going to be farcical because the pot is going to get empty very quickly.
All right, Howard. Well, thank you very much as ever. It's lovely to talk to you. And again, some interesting thoughts there. Still got callers on the line. On line 1, Rob Callister, MHK. Good afternoon. You're talking about work permits as well?
Yeah, good afternoon, Beth. I just want to step in and support a lot of what Neil was saying. I've been very outspoken since this has been mooted around about removing our work permit system. But I just want to be very clear with the people of the island. This isn't about our nationality or people coming to the Isle of Man. This is about future opportunities for the working population for the whole island. People potentially being turned down for promotion in the future, people being turned down opportunities of employment, but at the same time, maybe an influx of unskilled, unqualified workers that do play a valuable role within our working economy. But we've got to get the balance right, because if we have unskilled people coming into the Isle of Man with no qualifications, earning the minimum wage, where do we house them? And that is where my concerns are. So I'm really grateful that this has been delayed. I hope the Council of Ministers seriously look at this paper on behalf of the people of the Isle of Man, because I've always said for the last couple of months this is the wrong paper to come to Tynwald.
So what would be your solution then, Mr. Callister? We know there are jobs that need to be filled. Not everybody, as we know, who grows up and is schooled and educated here in the Isle of Man wants to stay here. What is the solution to this, in your opinion?
OK, the first solution is we've got to try our best as an island to encourage more of our students to return home after university.
How would you do that then?
Well, we have to put in place initiatives, maybe look at further tax breaks, looking at housing options, maybe looking at writing off student loans if they are working in the sectors that we need the island to flourish in.
OK, so how do you pay for that then? We are in a climate where the financial situation just isn't great at the moment.
Yes, OK, so we'll take Neil's suggestion, and he's absolutely right. We as an island, we are paying £10,000 upwards to relocate people with certain skills. Surely some of those funds could be allocated to bringing more of our students home and allowing them to actually nurture within our working environment. We've also got to sort out nightlife, housing, and the general feel and look of the island to encourage more people. This is not about stopping people coming to work for in the Isle of Man. If you've got the right skills, then you can come to the Isle of Man relatively straightforward and quickly. This is just a simple process. And let's be very clear, the work permit is not a barrier. It's a very simple process. And that was simplified when I was in the Department for Enterprise back in 2017, when we brought through a raft of changes. But what we didn't do was we weren't disrespectful to the 1952 regulation that was brought in as a work control.
So I wonder then, Mr. Callister, who is going to determine what skills we actually want over here and which people we're going to say no thank you to?
Well, this again comes down to when I was first elected back in 2016, one of the very first presentations I attended in Tynwald was talking about future markets, where the island was going, e-gaming, cannabis, insurance, banking. It is up to us in government to say this to our students, to say that we are looking for more chefs, we are looking for more accountants. And if you consider a career as a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, or as the professions I've already said, then we will support you through university. And if you come back to the Isle of Man and support our working population. There is another point as well, which I know the Minister was slightly wrong on. He talks about we get hung up on this 172 people that are registered unemployed. But actually on the island, there is 680 people looking for work at the moment. Many of those just haven't registered for unemployment benefits.
So I'm sure people listening who hold the same views of you will be heartened to hear you say all this. I think, though, there is a general feeling that what is actually being done, it's great talking about it, you can come on here and talk about it, but physically, what are you doing to address this, to push forward the solutions you think need to happen?
OK, I've already said in my consultation response, I've given a raft of different things that the department should be doing to exhaust all avenues. One of those I definitely think is looking at our immigration routes into the Isle of Man, the fees attached. A family of 2 adults and 3 children coming into the Isle of Man with the skills that the Isle of Man needs today are having to find up to £13,000 in fees. That is a barrier. It's not the work permit.
Should we be closing the Isle of Man to retirees who want to settle over here in their later years?
Well, it depends if they're making an economic benefit or if they're becoming a drain. I don't know. That is a really serious discussion point that we need to have. What we do need is to increase our working population on the island. That is the difficult question. The question is, how do we do it? But in order to do that, we've got to look at, we already know the strain that's on Nobles Hospital. We already know the strain that's on our secondary schools, because I've already asked the question. Our secondary schools are currently at 103%. And even if we take in mobile classes, it takes it down to 96%. The question is the Isle of Man ready for a spike in our general population? The answer from the evidence is very clear, and that is no.
Rob Callister, MHK, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Beth.
So this is the Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Lots of thoughts there. What do you make of what you've heard so far? If you'd like to give me your opinion, I'd love to hear it. 66 13 68. But in a moment, we've got lots of texts and emails to go through as well.
The Mannin Line with Beth Espey. When the Mannin Line's not on air, call Manx Radio to leave your opinion for broadcast on 682 631. Manx Radio.
It is 12:35. Beth looking after things on the Mannin Line with you today. Chris Quirk on the phone, 66 13 68. That's the number to call. If you're new to the Mannin Line, we'd love to hear from you. Lots to think about today. So let's just go through some of the WhatsApp messages and emails that we've had. First of all, Mary in Ramsey says, I've just been over to Douglas from Ramsey and both on the way there and on the way back, very foggy on the mountain. Several cars with no lights on, other cars flashed them to no avail. So thank you for that. Paul has been in touch to say, well done to the hip department. We need more news like this. On the cardiology error, what happens now? Will the person responsible be reprimanded? How did this slip by everyone else? There must have been hundreds of letters sent out. This time would not have been taken very much to be noticed by someone. It cannot allow to be something that happens again. That's about the cardiology appointments. We know there was that administrative error. I think Manx Care, to be fair, has been very open about that. So cardiology patients who had their appointments cancelled at short notice, they are going to be rebooked and they will be seen sooner than 2024. And there has been an apology from Manx Care. So I don't know, are we in that point of view where we always need to hold somebody to account, or do we think, OK, an error happened, they've addressed it and now we move on? I don't know. What do you think? Neil was spot on about the work permits. I notice how it is usually the non-Manx MHKs that want to remove the work permit system. That was from Mark. A sad Big John in Laxey says the only people who will prosper for the collapse of the works permits are the employers in the Isle of Man. Will be flooded with cheap labour, which will ultimately lower the pay for local people who are unskilled. It is not good for working class people who are already struggling. Now, Ian's been in touch about something that we've talked about on and off over the past few months. He says, what is going on with chemists? Every time I go to collect a prescription, there's a huge queue out of the door. Then you're usually told there's an item short or due in, so you have to call back. It seems the same conversation with people in the queue in the front. I presume it's the same island-wide, so I won't mention, says Ian, the chemist that I use. Everything seems to be difficult these days. Personally, Ian says, I blame technology, which doesn't seem to be making anything as easy as it's probably supposed to do. Everything has to be done with a screen and an app. No one is reaching out or going forward to sort things out. I do wish someone would ban those annoying American phrases. We are going to find people dropping out of the system as it becomes more difficult. I think I would if I was on my own. That is from Ian. Actually, it's been a little while maybe since we had an update on the pharmacy situation, so we will chase that one. Well said, that man. I think this is a text earlier on referring to Neil's comments about the work permit situation. Ali says, all I can say is hear, hear, Neil. Thank you. I totally agree with everything Neil has said. He is so right, says Peter. Your caller is absolutely right. I'm feeling more and more like an immigrant in my own island. More and more English coming here, trying to turn it into the place they left. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because it's a difficult line to cross. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because we do need to move forward. We do need people to fill jobs. Not all the jobs that are there and available at the moment are being filled by people who were born and bred over here in the Isle of Man. It's such a bad thing opening up. Totally agree with Neil, says Dewan715. Texter ending 068 says, I agree with Neil. Neil, do you fancy a job? Well said, Neil, says Laurel. Ian says, well said regarding the work permit situation from your first caller. I fully support all he said. Well said from Neil. Totally agree. My daughter is paying over £1,100 a month in rent for a 2-up, 2-down house. She will never get onto the housing ladder. The buy-to-let market is really, as he says, wealthy pensioners coming here, buying everything up and most definitely not making contributions to tax or NI. Well said, Neil. Many thanks again. And that was from Pam. I believe the benefits are accessible for only 6 months' work and self-employed can work straight away. They don't understand our planning laws or building control regulations. That's from texter ending 382. And Dick has been in touch to say of all the apologies given by Manx Care, the one given today about the cardiology debacle has to be the best. The CEO has blamed everything under the sun, from the old waiting list, from the old DHSC 3 years ago, the COVID 2 years ago, then staffing levels, then the shortfall in budget. They spent this year more than the old management and the DHSFC of Nobles did before Manx Care arrived. And then to top it all, they blame the patient for not turning up on time. Dick says there were only 2 things she didn't blame. 1, the weather, and 2, herself and Manx Care. I don't know, is that fair really? Because they have apologised and they have pledged to move forward with this. So I think there has been an apology. Tony and Douglas, I could not agree more. Neil, here. I do hope that every member of Tynwald is listening. Let's go back to the lines and join Sally now. Good afternoon, Sally.
Good afternoon. I was just on the talking about the fact that I'm coming back on the boat on Sunday night from Liverpool, which gets in about 10:10 if you're lucky. And there's no way. In fact, it'll get in later than that. And they've just told me it's very unlikely that I'll get the 11:15 p.m. bus back to Ramsey. So how am I expected to get home? There's no way I can pay for a taxi. I said to her, I'll have to sleep on the bench, because if I miss the bus because the boat's a bit late or I don't get off, even if I only have hand luggage, there's no way unlikely to get the 11:15 from Lord Street. And I don't know if people are aware of that.
That is a real issue, Sally. And presumably, have you flagged this with anybody, maybe phoned the bus department to see if there's anything that can be done to help you?
I did phone the bus people and they said, well, if you missed it, bad luck, it's the last one on a Sunday night.
So is there anybody that you know who might be able to come and get you? Because that's a terrible time, as you say, to be left in Douglas.
Well, this is it. And quite frankly, I'm sort of an older age now and I'm on a stick. And most of my friends don't drive at night because they've got cataracts or they won't drive out at night.
OK, Sally, remind us...
Other people I know who are younger, they would come, but they've got children.
OK, remind us when you're coming back, and perhaps if somebody's on the same sailing, they might be able to help you. But you're right, it does flag up an important issue there. So when are you coming back?
I'm coming back. I'm going out on Saturday morning, and I'm coming back this Sunday evening. Okay. I'm going over to watch my daughter run the Chester Marathon.
Oh, how lovely. So the Sunday evening sailing from Liverpool?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if anybody is listening...
I found it out this morning.
Okay. Well, yeah, it flags an important issue which we will chase, Sally. But in the meantime, thank you so much for phoning. And if anybody is able to help Sally, if you might be on the same sailing and heading back up to Ramsey, it would be very much appreciated to give us a shout, and we might be able to put you in touch and hopefully sort that out for Sally coming there. I don't know if that's an issue that you've had a problem with boats being late and not connecting with public transport. Back to the lines. Line 2, we can join Ken now. Good afternoon, Ken.
Afternoon there. I was just wondering how many people like me are thinking that Mr. Wright's interview about good news about Manx Care and the bone, people breaking their bones, is just in conflict with the current Manx Care who always seem to have bad news, i.e. the recent ones, the heart problem. I was just wondering how long that interview was arranged.
Well, actually, it was arranged, I can tell you, because it was me who arranged it. We got the media release through about the review and how Nobles Hospital had fared in certain areas of it. I got in touch with the communications team and to see if Mr. Wright would be available. And so it was arranged literally probably about 5 minutes before we went on air.
Right. I wondered, well, it just seems it's a sort of diversion. the Manx Care providing information as a diversion against the problems they're having about sort of saving us money. Still, no one has ever come up with how much Manx Care has saved us when they've come into being because of that report. And it's all problems with COVID, yes, that's always what they say, but nobody's actually said what savings they've made.
No, it's a good point. I think maybe, I don't know, Ken, whether it's quite difficult possibly to put a figure on that. I don't know. I'm not a financial person. But I think Mr. Wright said himself, it is nice to have some positive news coming from the hospital. And I think it's important for all of us to think, actually, there are areas certainly that are moving in the right direction.
Well, yes, Mr. Wright and his team and other surgeons do good hip replacements. I'm amazed that I had my 2 hips done and people were amazed, didn't you go away? I said, no, it was done at Nobles. Wonderful. But I do wonder about Manx Care themselves. They don't seem to be big. They're always borrowing money, like the old system used to be.
I suppose. Okay. All right, lovely. Ken, thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you. Message on WhatsApp from Alex. Can someone from Laxey Commissioners explain why there's been no street lighting on Laxey Prom for 6 weeks? Obviously, don't know the answer to that or any of the issues surrounding it, Alex, but we can certainly ask the question. If somebody from Laxey Commissioners is listening and they've got time before 1 o'clock to let us know, we can bring that to you. So we've had a message with regard to the one that was sent in, I think, from Ian about pharmacy. Clear Pharmacy took over the Ramsey Pharmacy yesterday afternoon, so things should improve quite quickly there, hopefully. So perhaps moving in the right direction. John says buy-to-let should be taxed enough to make it much less attractive, then people may be able to buy instead of renting. Mannin Line, the Isle of Man needs a non-resident tax for anyone who owns a property who is not a tax resident. This would slow non-residents from purchasing homes on the island that are needed for residents. We also need a second home property tax for residents and non-residents. This would slow the number of multiple houses that people own. This would also provide additional income for the island while protecting residents. That is the thought of Hillary. Regarding Howard's call, says Ed, I'd like to know what would Howard do if he was in a position of having money to buy a house and get a return on the investment? Would he not bother and leave his money in the bank and effectively lose money? I think not. It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because, some people do extremely well. And should they be penalised because of the way that they operate their own personal business affairs? I don't know. It is a really tricky one. Well said, Neil, says text ending 572. He summed it up perfectly. If, as a Chamber of Commerce have said, most work permits are approved in any case, so that proves the system works for the key areas it applies, relaxing work permit legislation will only serve to keep wages at a minimum for workers here. People living here can't get housing, hospital appointments, dentists. Comyn needs to focus on sorting that out, and then they may reach their intended 100,000 population. Now, here is a message from Laurie about something that is happening from next week. That's October the 9th into the 15th. The Isle of Man is going pink and blue for baby loss awareness. And Laurie says she runs a baby, infant and child loss charity on the Isle of Man for bereaved families. This ranges from a miscarriage to an adult child loss. And buildings across the Isle of Man are going to be illuminated and decorated in the colours pink and blue. Businesses and offices, it can be anything from lights, candles, clothing, hair, makeup, displays, just to raise awareness about baby loss and child loss globally. And Baby Loss Awareness Week is actually now in its 21st year, and it's an opportunity for everyone in the baby loss community and beyond just to come together, remember, commemorate much loved and missed babies and children. It's a really difficult thing to talk about, so really appreciate you getting in touch there, Laurie, and let us know what is happening next week. Des says, I've got this brand new magic wand, so whatever we need, just say. Oh, Des, that's brilliant. We will definitely be in touch. John says, in reality, young people whose eyes are opened when going to university do not wish to return to a small island. The UK is currently considering removing inheritance tax. I don't know, is that true, John? I think there's something very attractive about maybe going off and seeing the world a little bit, but I think there is a bit of a homing instinct for many, many people, especially when you think about coming here to raise a family, for example. It is, it's not all bad. And I think we have talked about that on the show before, haven't we, when we've talked about some of the really good things about the Isle of Man. RC says, I totally agree with your caller about the housing. Our government is letting the building companies do whatever they want to people off the island, and they are destroying our beautiful island. Our government is sitting back and letting it happen. I have no faith in any of them. That is from RC. Back to the lines. We can join Alison now. Good afternoon, Alison.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Very well, thank you. Just following up on your conversation with Mr. Callister, I'm in agreement with what he says. I respect him as a person. I respect him as a politician. He's one of very few honest politicians. What concerns me is that everything that he said was being said in the election campaign back in 2021, and 2 years on, and we're not any further on in retaining our young people on the island or bringing them back to the island. What's here for them? The infrastructure is shot. I'm Manx through and through, and I'm embarrassed about the Isle of Man at the moment.
Alison, you were an MHK candidate back in 2021. I know this is something that was raised in your manifesto and in some of the conversations that you had in that time. What would you do then?
I think it's going to take more than one person to make the decision, but it's speaking to the right people. And I'll just give you an example, Beth, a constituent who lives in Moran, who was doing teacher training at University College Isle of Man. And once her studies had finished, she's had to go to the UK for 1 year work experience before then being in a full-time employed teaching job. The chances are that she won't come back. And this is one person. This is probably happening to a number of people. Why, when University College Isle of Man works in conjunction with Chester University, can that not be done on the Isle of Man?
You said, Alison,
we're sending people away.
But you also said, this problem needs to be solved by talking to the right people, and I wonder who you think the right people are.
Well, for example, this young lady who's gone off island, you would start by talking with those in charge of education and University College Isle of Man. It can't be done by one person, and it's getting people together to tackle this issue and make changes. And it's not that's just one example. The infrastructure is diabolical. We're going back to the archaic years of having our mail come over to the Isle of Man by ferry, whereas I know it's been flown over for plus 40 years. And, suddenly we want to attract businesses and individuals to the Isle of Man, and yet we can't get a letter here.
I suppose you have to have aspirations, though, don't you, Alison?
Well, of course you do. But the Isle of Man is an embarrassment at the moment.
Okay.
And something has to change.
All right, Alison, thank you very much. As ever, lovely to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Beth. Bye.
All right, take care. That was Alison there. A lot of texts and emails, messages on WhatsApp as well. So if I don't get round to reading yours before the end of the programme, they will be kept and read out on a future programme or issues followed up if needs be. Anne says, just wondering when Treasury will reassure and announce they'll fund BBC's licence fee permanently and look after the island's elderly. I've not paid for years and no intention of funding the BBC, but my elderly parents panic every year as they can't afford to throw money away when they don't or listen to the BBC. Ed says, back in touch in addition to a previous text that he sent in, I don't believe there's a housing crisis any worse than there has been at various times over the past 40 years. The average price of a property is now 5 times my current wage, which is the same as it was when I bought my first property 33 years ago. Buying a property is hard. It's never really been any different. If they all of a sudden make it too easy to buy property by devaluing it, the property market will collapse and an awful lot of homeowners will end up with negative equity, which is no good for anyone. Here's a texter who says, I moved over here with my family in 2013. It took over 3 months and a letter from my MHK to even get a work permit. I'm a qualified quantity surveyor. I owned my own business in the UK and I wanted to start my own business over here. The work permit department was very obstructive. They didn't even know what I did for a living and even made comment I had no accountancy qualification, but I look after the money on building sites. They didn't even know what a quantity surveyor did, yet would not issue a work permit until they received a letter from an MHK. My kids were in the local school. My wife was doing craft club at the school for free at lunchtimes. We had completely integrated into our local community, yet it was against the law for me to work. I agree with the work permits. It's just the people who issue them that need more training. A text here saying, generally speaking, if you are unemployed on the Isle of Man, you are either unable to work or you do not want to work. There are many jobs out there. Just look at those available at the job centre. However, many people do not want them because it's a wrong type of job or not paid enough. Many people take on these roles who come over to the Isle of Man, and thank goodness that they do. Text here saying, would it be better to encourage students to take up vocational education rather than going to university? Many are doing Mickey Mouse degrees and end up working in coffee shops. Meanwhile, we have lost a lot of our young people. I think that's something that's changed as well. You know, going to university, 20 odd years ago, you were very lucky, I suppose, if you got the support from the Isle of Man government with fees being paid for, etc. That's not the situation now. And so I don't know, are as many people going to university at all? I think some of the statistics would show they're not. Joe says problems often occur when the House of Keys can't manage its decisions, so go over to the adjacent island for advice and spend thousands of pounds of our money and decide to do nothing at all. This is a texter from John in Onchan. I am so pleased to hear such an intelligent and researched view from Rob Callister, MHK. I totally agree work permits are not the problem and should remain in place to protect the future of our island and that of our local children. If there is a problem, maybe it's the delay in processing a work permit application. 3 of my children have left the island for university but can't afford to return here as they cannot get a reasonably priced place to live. Thank you very much for that, John. Totally agree with Neil and Rob Callister on work permits. I agree with Neil also, says Matty. He says, keep the work permit system. And Sue says, I am puzzled by the intent of the Department of Education to make the sex education curriculum more suitable for Manx children. Do our pupils get a sanitised version, the Cabbage Patch story maybe? Or does this suit the agenda of the bigotry that the island is famous for? All children, says Sue, wherever they live, should be taught age-appropriate information. And I think the problem was that the information was not age-appropriate and not the fact that Manx children are more sensitive and naive than anywhere else. Well, that is just about all we have time for on today's programme. Thank you so much for all your comments and contributions. I'll be back at 5:30 today with Update. Mannin Line, though, will be back at midday tomorrow. Phil Gorn will be in the chair. But if you can't wait until then, you can always call our out-of-hours line at 682-631. Leave a message. We can play it out on the show. We can ask the question if there's a particular government department, for example, that we need to speak to. And we'll keep you up to date with what's happening. Coming up next, it is Christy D with 1 to 3. So stay tuned to Manx Radio this afternoon, and I'll talk to you again later.